Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Will Work for Patients, a free advice podcast dedicated to help chiropractors get on purpose and grow their practices. Get ready to tune in and turn up the volume of your practice marketing. And now, turning up the volume on his mic, big-time chiropractic advocate and your host, here is Frank Sardella.
Move over, Conan, because here we come. Well, thank you, Michelle, for that totally undeserved intro. So lucky to have you introducing me, though. And welcome to you, too, ladies, gentlemen, to Will Work for Patients, our 10th episode. Can you believe it? We made it to episode 10. Outstanding. Me? I'm Frank Sardella, and I'm so happy to be here with you again today in our podcast show. I do this show free for you to not only give you marketing help in your practice, but to keep you on purpose, to keep you pumped up, and to keep you going. And that's my commitment in a grassroots effort to make a chiropractic world. So welcome, and welcome back, and also welcome newcomers. I know you're out there because I'm getting the feedback, and we see the subscriptions going up, so thank you. And so glad to have you here with us today in the show. And what a day you picked to tune in, let me tell you. Who's pumped? Are you pumped? I'm pretty pumped today. What did you think of episode 9? I'd like to thank again so much Desiree Lotz, CEO of Sunshine Vitamin Products, for opening our eyes to such a great idea there. Such a pleasure always to have her here on the show, and we definitely want to have her back. And in the spirit of having guests on the show, we're going to continue that trend, and today's show is no exception. Okay, so keep that in mind. Hey, real quick, our photo campaign is just going tremendously. I want to thank all the docs and their staffs who've been sending in the photos. If you haven't already, you've got to join in on the fun. Get an old piece of cardboard and write Will Work, the number 4, and Patients, and send it to us for our Instagram. We're getting quite a collection up there. If you're not on Instagram, it's no problem. We recommend that you get on it. But if you're not on Instagram, you can forward it through our other social media pages, or you can always email it directly to me at frank.screenings@live.com, along with your feedback about the show. We definitely want that feedback too, but please, please, please send in those photos. We're begging you for them because this is just so much fun. Okay, now, I know you're never going to believe this, but we have quite a show for you today. Quite an episode indeed. And I think you already know that by now. I know I say that every time, but I couldn't mean it possibly more than I've meant it in the past on today's show. And there's just something special. And that kind of segues into what today's episode is all about. Today's episode is entitled Chiro Marketing DeFEET. And FEET is spelled F-E-E-T. You know, maybe that drew you in, maybe it didn't. But this one is special for a very special reason, and that's because it was selected. The title was selected by our very special guest today on the show. So, what does that mean? Well, what are we going to cover today? First of all, we're going to introduce to you a practice-building giant who is in the top 3% of practices in his profession in terms of growth. And he's also a top practice management consultant as well. He's actually quite a smooth operator in PR and marketing. Okay? Next, we're going to have our guest delineate how he built multiple practices. And many of the things that he did that I've found more or less apply to chiropractic marketing. Okay? And if you haven't gotten it so far, this guy is not in the chiropractic profession, but there are a lot of parallels. I even learned a thing or two from him. And we've done work extensively together in the past and what have you, and I've definitely seen how he operates and how he built his practice. I've been very impressed by it. And like I said, I've learned a trick or two over the years from him as well. Even my closing style has a little bit of this in it. And then finally, we're going to find out some tips from him on little things you can do and big things you can do to increase your volume right now. How does that sound? All of that in a top 10 list too. Okay? Great. Now, my guest today, let's get down to business here. My guest today on the show hails from New Jersey. He is not only a colleague and even briefly a former client, he is one of my dearest and closest personal friends. He's a giant, an absolute giant in terms of PR and practice building, and he's not even a chiropractor. But I don't hold that against him. And incidentally, neither will you after you hear this interview. This one is hot, okay? Our guest today is a podiatrist, and therein lay the title of the episode, right? Marketing DeFEET. Our guest today is a podiatrist for 26 years. As I said, he's in the top 3% right now of growth in podiatry practice size, okay? Just in terms of size, he's in the top 3% of practices, and he's built 2 successful practices. And again, I can't say it enough, he's an absolute marketing genius. I've even learned quite a bit from him, like I said. This guy is at the top of his game PR-wise in his community. And by the way, he's not only a total inspiration, but he's a ton of fun to be around. Okay, he's a practice management consultant for 15 years. He's an author and even a developer of a video staff training. I could go on, but I'm just going to let the rest speak for itself. So without further ado, let me introduce you to today's guest on Will Work for Patients, Dr. Dan Margolin. Welcome to the show, Dr. Margolin. Are you there?
Thank you so much, sir. Man, that is some intro. Wow. You gotta follow me around and just introduce me like that to people. I really appreciate it, you know.
Absolutely. I could actually. I could do your.
Great.
I would more than happily run your personal PR for you. I have to tell you.
I love you. I appreciate it, sir.
How far do we go back? I think it's like the late 90s, isn't it?
It's a long time. We were babies back then.
I know, we were babies. We were really wet behind the ears, I think.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. It's been an exciting few decades here, right?
Absolutely. We could probably do a whole show on our escapades.
I think so. I think
yeah, but we'll leave that for another show.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I actually want to get down to business because I want to allow for maximum amount of time for you to speak because I have a whole bunch of questions I want to ask you and a whole bunch of things that I want you to share. I always promise my listeners a top 10 list, so if you can have some patience with this, I think this will be something you could relate to as well. Okay, you may even find some reality in this in your own practice. In fact, I'm sure you have. I've probably heard some of these things from you. Okay, so today's top 10 list, okay? And it's definitely related to the subject at hand here, but regardless, I think this is a good one. I've been dying to find a show where this one fits in, and I think this is going to be the show. And even if it doesn't fit in, I just love this top 10 list, okay? Today's top 10 list is the top 10 screening excuses for coming home with little or nothing. How would you like that one, docs, right? Top 10 screening excuses for coming home with little or nothing. Let's get started. Number 10, it was a bad venue. How many times have you heard your staff come home and say, oh, it was just a bad venue. We shouldn't go back there anymore, right? That's number 10 on the list. And actually, that's a pretty big one. If you think about it, I only have it at number 10, so that should say something. Okay, number 9, it's summer and people are on vacation. Okay, this one comes in many forms. People were at church that day, people more like spending a sunny day at the beach, like all kinds of things that relate to like where people are when you don't really know where people are, okay? Number 8, screenings don't pull like they used to. That one's pretty self-explanatory. I think I've even used that one. Number 7, it was dead. That's a big one that you hear. I might have used that one too in my early days. Number 6, people just don't want chiropractic care. That one's almost evil, actually, I think. I don't like that one very much, but I have heard that one often. Number 5, no one was qualified. And that leads in right to number 4, which no one was local. They sort of go hand in hand, but I've heard them both said in different ways. Most of these are just generalities, and they're just, again, excuses for what should have been done at the screening. Number 3, actually, you know what? Before I go on, Dr. Margolin, you've probably heard some doozies. What do you think is the most popular one?
I think everything you just said I've heard. I would say like one of the common ones I have is like I handed out a lot of business cards. They're going to call you on Wednesday, right? Like.
Well, actually, that's really appropriate because that leads into the next 2 because that sort of covers 2 of these here. I've heard that one a million times too. Oh, I gave out a ton of business cards, you know. And that's actually number 3, handed out a ton of business cards. And then number 2, I got a lot of leads, right? And leads are not, to guys like Dr. Margolin and myself, like a lead is really not worth anything. Like well, it is worth something, but it's not It's not the same thing as coming home.
They don't usually call you as much as you would think. You know, like when you have somebody out there getting the leads, they make it sound like they're going to start calling you tomorrow, and you show up. It never seems to work that way.
Exactly. Never seems to work out. Okay. And the number one screening excuse for coming home with little or nothing is no one was interested. Dr. Margolin, what would you do to your staff if someone came to you and said no one was interested at the venue?
Wow, that's not good. That's not good. That is not
You
good.
like it. Okay.
It would not be long for this world, you know?
Yes, that's right. Okay. Certainly not our most educational top 10 list, but it is something like I like to sort of do these what grinds my gears kind of.
You know, it's very practical. I have to say, like, if you're not aware of those things and people come to you, you can accept them, and they're really. There's always a way around those different excuses, but certainly they're out there.
Wow, you know what? I'm going to have you back. you back me up on these things. I want to have you back on the show.
Wonderful.
You may be vying here for the co-host spot. I think you're moving into the number one slot here. Okay, all right. Well, let's jump right in because I want to get you talking. I don't want to do so much talking today because you are the man as far as I'm concerned in terms of like how you've done what you've done. And yes, we're looking at a parallel industry today. We're looking at chiropractic versus podiatry, but listeners, you would not believe how many parallels there are. Doc, let me just ask you first, because I'm very interested in you telling me a little more about this, and I really haven't even had a chance, knowing you as well as I do, to look into this. But you actually recently wrote a book called Empowered. Yeah?
I did, yes, sir.
And could you just tell us a little bit about it? And embarrassingly, like normally for the show, I would have read something like this, but it was such a new thing for me to find out. I just figured maybe you could talk about it a little bit. It might intrigue us, or maybe somebody would be interested in reading it.
Yeah, you know, I mean. The name is Empowered, and it's basically a hard-won lessons in business and life. So I started writing it many years ago. My daughter was a little bit older when I got married, so my daughter is 6 years old. About 6 years ago, when she was born, I thought, you know what, I would love to write up a list of all the things I've run into in my life that I could give to her when she got older so she would know things to avoid and things basically to go towards. Wow. And so that's what it sort of started as a list. And you know, at the behest of some friends, one of whom was an author, he said, "Man, why don't you turn that into a book?" And so that's where it came from. It really came from some of my own life lessons and things I've gotten out of it. And again, it was written really for my daughter.
Wow, I'm going to expect a signed copy of that. You know what? I want to read that. I want to read that for sure.
It was sort of cool in writing it, you know, because it was actually things I'd actually experienced in my own life. It's funny, you go back over things and you don't realize, like, you start writing about something and then all of a sudden something else pops up and you go, oh my God, I forgot all about that. And
wow.
It's sort of cool. It's sort of an interesting experience.
Fantastic. I love it. Wow, that's so well done.
You know, the other thing I got to say, one of the things that I approached this with, I decided to do it and do it relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. And I'd always had the concept that writing a book would take me, like 50 years, you know?
Wow.
And I did it in 2 hours a day, 8 weeks.
No kidding.
Not bad, huh?
No kidding.
It was
I might have you do some ghost writing for me at that rate. My books aren't writing that fast, so that's outstanding. Well, thanks for letting us know about that, and maybe we'll have a little plug at the end of the show for how people could eventually pick up a copy of that or whatever.
Great.
But I just let's make a note now. I'm interested in reading that on you. I'm really happy to find that out. And actually, that sort of leads me into something because you're definitely, like, in terms of empowered, I've seen you empower others, and that's one of the things that I really respect about you. And from what I understand, it's a big part of practice building with you. And so one of the things I want to ask you about is about staff morale, because I know that you found something very specific about morale in practice, and it's something that really gets ignored and people don't think of. They get so tied up in the ins and outs and how much am I spending on direct mail that they leave out some of these very basic things. So tell me a little bit about how you use morale to practice build.
Well, you know, when people start sending out promotions, sometimes the promotion of public relations doesn't work, not because the promotion in public relations doesn't work. It's because when the people come in, they come into a negative environment. Like the staff, I'm sure you've had the experience we all have of going into a restaurant where the waiters are rude, the staff are rude.
Oh, yeah.
You don't go back, you don't refer people. And, you know, even in this modern age, right, word of mouth is still one of the most important things. Mm-hmm. I mean, you really got to blow somebody away. When they come to your practice,
forget about it.
They got to get that, right? They got to get that grade A treatment. They got to feel like they're the most important person in the world. And it can't just be you. It's got to be all of your support staff. They've got to get we think about promotion a lot of times in terms of sending something out like a marketing piece, but also if you think of a smile as promotion, you think of your staff smiling, it's sending something out. It's saying to people, hey man, welcome to our office, So I always instill that in my own staff, and it's very important. And unfortunately, not every staff member can actually make the grade on something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, absolutely. And I think that gets overlooked. A lot of our docs, just so you know, in chiropractic, there's such a purpose behind the profession, so the morale tends to be high, but not always. Not always, I found. And I found my share of low morale among that. So I think that's very important. And
there's a book. What was it? The book was called Good to Great, right? It was written many, many years ago. But what the author did was he went in and he looked at some of the really great companies that existed, like the all-time great ones, and he really did a review of them. And he said, well, what was it about these companies that was so superior to other companies? And he found out that it was really that they put their emphasis on the hiring of staff. That they only he described it as a bus. And he would only fill the bus up with passengers that were at a certain level.
Wow.
And he wouldn't drive that bus anywhere until it was filled up with the right people. And, I found that to be a very important concept.
Uh-huh. I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I like the bus concept, too. That's very interesting.
It was cool. It was very cool.
Yeah. And I think that really comes down to also it's a staff training thing, really. You sort of have to train the high morale and the good attitude into your staff, yeah? Would you say?
Absolutely. It's the first thing is obviously getting the people on board the bus that could actually be trained to do that. And then, putting in the training programs and really spending the time and doing that. And it's the concept of, you're better off spending the time at the beginning because then you almost don't ever have to do it again.
Sure.
Where if you don't do it, you're always sort of recreating it and building it back up. And I'd rather have really good people with me. I want them trained up. And what I find is too, you talked about purpose in chiropractic. It is an awesome purpose. But sometimes people coming on board don't know that much about what your purpose is. And it's up to you as the owner to direct them into it, to actually explain it to them so that you can almost let them share your fire. Because most of the owners that I see, most of the doctors, they started in their fields because they had a burning desire to do something, and they get a little bit beat up. And if they don't surround themselves or train people around them to have that same desire, it gets lost a little bit. And I just find sometimes putting coals on that purpose and really getting them excited about it again, including your staff, makes a huge difference.
Brilliant. And what I think is brilliant about that is putting purpose into your training. I think that's probably neglect. You get so involved in the how-to that you forget about all the other things. In fact, Doc, in my training materials, I found that when I first, I was sort of a little bit of a failure when I first tried to teach my methods to others. And what I realized is I wrote one manual and it wasn't working. And then I realized there was a whole second manual that involved my whole mindset. And there were things that I didn't tell them. I told them step by step, here's how you do it. You go A, B, C, and then you say this, and then you say that. But then I forgot about the attitude, the mindset, all those things that I just take for granted that I didn't realize how to be trained into somebody. So I think you make an excellent point there.
I think what you're saying, it's all about viewpoint. What I mean? It's how do you look at life?
I agree.
The glass half empty or half full? Absolutely.
Wholeheartedly. And then so much so that and I actually I'm totally just going to plug this for you, Doc, because I was pretty blown away by something that you just developed. You developed a whole product based on how you've individually been training your staff over the years. Yes?
Yeah. Yes, we have. Yeah.
Tell us about that briefly.
So, I've spent probably 15 years and not only work with my own staff, work with other businesses and stuff. And we found out that there are certain core data, there's certain core information that if you give it to somebody, they can apply it, it makes a huge difference. And I've spoken about this to my staff and we've gone over it and stuff. But we decided to actually turn it into a video series with a workbook so that I don't actually have to continuously doing it, because I've done it so many times that we've just taken it and made it so that it's operational. It sort of works by itself. And it's cool. It's great. I mean, we just real quick, we put my staff through it right now. They've already had my training. They've gone through it. Once we did this, and this was probably about 2 months ago, the second week they went through our training, we had the highest production day in 26 years. And the third week was the highest production week in 26 years.
Wow.
Pretty good, right? I was pretty excited about that.
No kidding. And that's not even, you're not even giving marketing advice there. You're talking about staff training.
Let me tell you, I mean, it was really like staff training, but it was put in for real. And one of the interesting things that happened, which I didn't expect it's when you put in organization, one of the things that happens is things start to quiet down around you. In other words, staff start to really know what's expected. They start to do, but also the staff members that are not so vested in things being quiet show up. And so that's exactly what happened. We had one of our staff members who was really like not sort of knowing what my purpose is, wasn't really going along with the same thing, be pointed out to me. And I never would have seen them. I never would have spotted them if the organization hadn't gone in and if the other staff members haven't actually pointed it out to me. So that was really a great, great benefit.
You make an excellent point there. I think that's of absolute importance, and docs listening and staffs and whatever, don't neglect the basic staff things. These are things that have everything to do with their production level and everything in practice, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's genius.
It's sort of like going into like a Nordstrom kind of experience, right? That's really what you want to recreate, where people, or even more basic, like having somebody inviting them into your home. I never understood when one time years ago I'd gone into a doctor's office and they had the windows blacked out and it said, "Do not knock on window. We check every 20 minutes to see who's out there." And I thought, what kind of practice is this?
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
So that was not something we wanted to recreate, for sure.
I agree with that. Well, thank you for that. That's a gem right there, and we're not even halfway down the list here. So, okay, so moving on then. So then this sort of naturally progresses into PR, and I have a couple of PR questions I want to talk to you about, because really, like, you talk about your morale and then your staff training, but it really was all moving toward the PR that you do for your practice, and I know you do a lot. As a matter of fact, my first time in your office, the first thing I noticed was some newspaper articles on you for a big PR campaign you've done for years, which I'm going to want you to talk about. And you talked about a TV show you guys got involved with. What PR-wise do you find, just pure public relations as opposed to like pure like going out and getting patients and marketing, did you find success with? And maybe you can give us a couple of anecdotes here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so the public relations is basically the concept of it is to be well thought of in the community, right? And then if you put that in, it makes your marketing and your sales and those kind of things a lot easier. So, about 25 years ago, what happened, we had patients come in who, they had so much foot pain, they would come in and say, I haven't been able to wear these new shoes and I just threw them out. And I thought, wow, there's got to be some people out there that could use those. And so we just said, why don't you bring some of those shoes in and we'll find out if there's a need for it. And it just took off. And we've been doing this thing called the Shoes for the Needy campaign for about 26 years.
Wow.
Matter of fact, last year it was picked up by Pat Battle at Channel 4 News, and she did an interview with us on TV. We actually got about 3 minutes on the Channel 4 News. So that was pretty cool. We've actually raised, honestly, hundreds of thousands of pairs at this point. Mm-hmm. And actually just raised some of the, here's what happened to me last week, which was very cool along this program. I'm in with a patient, and she said, hey, excuse me, she said, "Hey, Dan, my daughter, who's 7 years old, just brought in all those shoes for you." And I looked out there, and there was a huge pile of shoes. And I said, "Well, that's really great. Like, how did she do it?" It was her, listen to this, Frank, it was her 7th birthday. Mm-hmm. And her mom said, what do you want for your birthday? What do you want to do? She said, "I want to have a party. I want to have like 30 people, and I don't want any gifts. What I want is my friends to bring shoes for that nice doctor."
No way.
Absolutely, man. So how cool was that? I mean, that just stopped me dead in my tracks. And
my goodness.
It was really cool. So that was one of my big wins recently. But we
absolutely love it. Yeah, I mean, and then shoes for the needy, podiatry. So it's really, it's innovation, it's ingenious, and that's really the thing. Wow, that's great.
Over the years, we've had a lot of newspapers cover that. I mean, pretty much I can go anywhere in the state, and if people don't know about our practice, I go, we've been doing the shoes for the needy thing. They go, "You're the guy that's been doing that for all those years." So it's been a great lead-in. Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. And then real quick, you also, I only bring this up because you and I, we have such a great sense of humor together, and we're fans of comedians and stuff. But you said something about a Practical Jokers TV show to me, didn't you? Or?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen Impractical Jokers on True TV.
I think I've heard of it.
It's these 4 guys that grew up together in Staten Island. And they basically do pranks. It's just a very funny show. And they filmed their podiatry series at our office in the summer. Mm-hmm. And basically what I did is I set up 10 patients that I really am good friends with that didn't have big problems. And we had a ball. If you get a chance to look it up, it's on YouTube. It's Impractical Jokers Podiatry. But, oh, my God, that was so much fun. I mean, it was really a great time.
Oh, fantastic. Now, that I didn't know about, and I'm going to have to see that for sure. So you'll have to make sure you share some clips. As a matter of fact, Doc, what I'm going to make you promise me right here on air is that you'll send me links to anything you have like that, because whenever we have a guest on the show, we like to share stuff about them on social media, so I would love to post some of that stuff.
Oh, so that'd be great. I appreciate it.
Make sure you get that for our listeners. Great. Okay, now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I want to know, you told me there were a couple of main campaigns that you did to absolutely build your practice. Not just one practice, you've built two already. Yeah. What were these main campaigns that you did?
Well, like one of the campaigns, I always believe that, you've got to stay in contact with the people that you meet, right? You don't want to sort of treat, I would get, as an example, I'd get a lot of practices that would come and say, listen, I want new patients. And you say, that's great, but what do you do with your old patients? Do you throw them to the side? Do you keep in communication with them and stuff? And so one of the main things that we do is about every 5 weeks or so, we actually send our patients some information, a postcard, something like that, to keep in communication with them. And it makes a huge difference. I mean, you can see years later, you get people that, you've been sending postcards to that didn't respond for 5 years, all of a sudden show up and go, they just don't forget about you, right? It doesn't allow for any competitor to come in. Your name is always in front of them. When they do have a problem, they remember you. When their friends have a problem, they remember you. It's just for me, it's been a big practice winner.
Wow, great.
The other one that we do is, it's like anything as far as targeting who is the main referral source for you. So one of the referral sources for us is other doctors, other medical doctors and stuff. And so we have a whole program targeted at sending them information. And we also do that, about every 5 weeks, something like that. So that's worked out really, really nicely.
I can get behind that one. We have a whole training module on just reaching out to other professionals, and we heavily emphasize medical doctors in that training. So I'm totally behind that. That one makes me light up.
Jennifer, you probably find the same thing, right? Most practices are, if you excuse my French, too damn quiet. They don't send out enough information. They don't, it's almost like they're shy, right? If you were to compare the practice to a person,
yes,
that person's really shy. Where you've got to roar, you got to be the lion in this thing, and you got to be out there, you got to be promoting yourself, you got to be banging it, and it's really important. It's an important viewpoint I found that just shyness doesn't cut it in this world,
Wow, that's profound. We could end the episode on that. Literally, I wouldn't even have to give a last word. That might be the most.
That might be the first profound thing I've ever said. So
honestly, I got to tell you, I think you've now made me the first person to inject the word shyness into the profession of chiropractic. I have been to every coach, consultant, seminar, whatever, and I've never heard it described that way. But Doc, you hit it right on the head. They're just too shy. They're too shy. So
no, it's something I just found working with people. It's just they just I think part of it honestly is the upbringing of somewhat the education system. My daughter, as an example, she's 6 years old. She's in kindergarten, and what does the teacher tell her? The teacher says, keep your conversations at the level of a whisper, and it's like every conversation now she's got a whisper.
Yeah.
Said, what is that? Who teaches somebody that? I mean, who is going to be successful in life? They walk around and they whisper all the time. It's just not going to happen.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I agree. And then, it's funny that how sort of naturally these subjects sort of kind of segue into each other. But you and I were talking before, and it sort of reminds me when you said you have to roar and you have to get out there and, whatever. But also, you said something that intrigued me when we were talking before the show today. You said something about how that you found early on that you misestimated, and you found this in a lot of doctors, you misestimated the effort that it actually takes to do this.
Yeah, I find this in my own personal life, and actually in my book, Empowered, I actually go into this a little bit, where I personally found that at least I misestimate almost everything I do by 200%. In other words, like if I say I need this number of patients and I got to do this amount of marketing, I'm always off by the 200%. It took me years to figure that out.
Agreed.
And unfortunately, what I did is I sat in a little bit of I wouldn't say a depression about it, but I had a little bit of upset because I was just misestimating the effort. When I recognized that, I was winning. I just needed to do a little bit more than I was doing to make that win evident. changed everything for me, Frank. You know what I mean? It just was like I wasn't taking a loss anymore on the fact that I wasn't getting what I wanted. I would just turn up my energy, turn up my volume, turn up the marketing campaigns, man. Everything would just be turned to a whole new level. And when that happened, that was it, man. It changed everything.
Amen. Amen. Let me tell you, I'm with you 100% on that. The figure of 200%, it's so funny that you bring that up because 2 episodes ago, the title of the episode was 2x your screening results. And the whole thing that they were to take away from that, my whole point, the moral of the story was that I wanted to shift their viewpoint from, gee, I'd like to get twice what I'm getting now to how come I'm getting half of what I should be getting? You know what I mean? And it's sort of that runs parallel. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's reminiscent of that. But as far as the estimation of like what it takes to do something, I really find that's I'm sure it's more than 200% with a lot of people. So I like that. Thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, I know we're getting a little pressed for time here, but I actually really want to get in this last question that I have for you, and I don't think the audience will mind because it's been a really good interview with you, Doc. But I want to talk about screenings simply because my forte is screenings. My expertise is a lot in that area, and I've been very successful. I've done thousands of them over the year, and particularly you and I, sort of where we intersect in practice is we've both relied on screenings quite a bit. We've both done a lot of mall things, and I had a whole mall kiosk campaign for a while and whatever, and you were doing something similar, and I even learned a lot from you, from your profession on what you guys and how you guys were doing it. So I really want to get into that a little bit. There were a couple of things particularly that I've made notes on of things that we talked about over the years and recently and whatever. One of them is that you had a mall kiosk for a while and you were heavily emphasizing mall screenings, but you recently found out something about better venues than the mall.
Well, you know, what we found out was a few things. We actually, when we really started looking back statistically at where we were getting more of our patients from, the mall screenings were good, but we were at the local fairs were really where we were kicking it. That's where really we were getting a lot more people. So those were really almost a better venue.
Fantastic. I mean, that's the kind of things that, you know, we're looking for. These little tidbits are really helpful. And there's something also on that subject that reminds me of. You were talking about the actual displays that you were using, because I remember, like, when you were in the Park Mall there or whatever that was that you had the kiosk at, that you had this really super highly professionally printed stuff there, and you had brochures that were professionally printed and everything, and it was very, like, sort of all set in your marketing and whatever. But you found out that having the highly professional thing was not quite the best thing to have.
Frank, is that the kicker or what? You know, you spend all this money on these massive, like, displays and all this professional, and you spend all this time making sure that people in the pictures are smiling and stuff, and you know, you'd probably do better sometimes with crayons, you know, where if you just wrote on a piece of paper. That's really what we found, where for whatever reason people perceive the professional looking displays at the malls as almost too corporate, and they would walk right by them, where the displays that we put up that were professional but at a little bit of a lower level really attracted more people. I'm not completely sure why that is, but it was sort of one of those aha moments for us.
Wow, how about that? And that's something I'd just like to highlight and emphasize, because I can tell you our listeners have a lot of experience with that. A lot of my clients have a lot of experience with that, and it seems every new client that I start with is like, you know, after our first coaching call together and whatever, unbeknownst to me or what have you, they come back, and before they even know that we do some professional printing or whatever, not that it matters, but they'll tell me how much money they just spent on printing a whole campaign and printing up, you know, posters and banners and all this stuff. And here you're saying, you know, a crayon will do the trick, you know.
Well, I mean, don't you find too, Frank, that when you're dealing with like new people coming on board that want to start to do screenings, they tend to be drawn towards putting a lot of money into the displays, rather than like the training of being able to confront people and talk to them.
Yeah,
right. Like it's a little bit of an easier way to go. Well, listen, I don't really want to confront anybody. I want to make this display a little bit nicer.
Hey, you just described why I'm in business, why I do what I do. So that's the thing. Okay, and then here's something I'm a fan of. You did a lot of walking around and meeting people, that kind of thing. You even told me a story about a diner and whatever. I've walked around the streets of New York City and actually gotten patients directly that way. So that interests me. So maybe tell me a little bit about that, or maybe you have a quick anecdote or something.
Well, you know what I found is, especially when I first started in practice, I didn't have a lot of money. So one of the basic things I would do is I find like a local diner. So I'd go to the counter, and I made a point of every morning eating breakfast at one of the counters, sitting next to somebody and just starting a conversation and talking to them and, really getting interested in them. And at the end of the conversation, I would just say, hey, listen, I just opened up my practice down the street. You know what? I really enjoyed talking to you. I'll tell you what, I'm going to take care of you. You ever have any foot problems or you know anybody that does, here's my card. You tell them we met here, and don't you worry about it. They're going to be taken care of. And inevitably, we would always get, if you did it maybe 3 or 4 times, one person would call up. So it was a great way to build practices, especially if you didn't have a huge amount of money or were just starting out.
Wow. That's fantastic, and I really hope everybody takes something away from that, if anything, because a lot of the people we work with are shoestring budget, and that's really.
You know what? It's a funny thing. Sometimes it's a good exercise too to just another thing I would do is just get out there
wholeheartedly,
and just walk on the street, talk to somebody about something in the area that maybe you're interested in. Like you say, listen, excuse me, you just walk up to somebody, and go, is there a good Italian restaurant around here? And you start in a conversation. They go, there's one down the block if you go this way and that way. At the end of the conversation, you go, you know what? Thank you so much. I've been looking for a great place. I'm actually the podiatrist right down the road. Here's my card. I just wrote on it, free consult. I'm going to take care of you. You were so nice to me. You have any problem? Boom. And it's a good exercise.
No, I agree with that. I just my only chuckle is I always considered you a smooth operator when it comes to stuff like that, and that's one of the things I want our audience to know. One of the things that I've taken away from working with Dr. Dan Margolin over the years is he's quite a smooth operator, and I even said in your introduction that I sort of even my clothes. My style of clothes is a little bit influenced by some things that I've seen in you about your non-shyness and your ability to do that. And second of all, I got to appreciate a good, sort of make up a reason to talk to somebody, because we very much, when we talk about people getting into corporations and gyms and different places to set up events, and you have to very quickly talk somebody into something. And very often times you have to play a little dumb or like sort of bend it a little bit so that, it's more comfortable to have this conversation and break the ice. So I'm all for that. So remember the Italian restaurant gag. You guys heard it here on Will Work for Patients, Dr. Dan Margolin. A trick everyone can use that won't cost you any money. Everybody can
get some good Italian restaurants, by the way.
That I was going to say, I'm sure that you add to your repertoire of great restaurants that you can attend, and you get some good Italian food. Reward yourself. Absolutely. Okay, good. That's about it as far as the subjects we're going to cover. First of all, thank you, Dr. Dan, for all of this.
Thank you so much for having me on. You've said so many nice things about me, and I got to tell you, I feel the exact same way about you. You are such a professional, and it's always such a great pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. I bow in your presence. I'm not worthy, blah, blah, blah. So, but thank you for that. But seriously, thank you for all the good advice. Let's recap here. I just want to recap and sort of go back over this, because this was a really action-packed episode, and we went over a lot of stuff. And I think I even need to recap for myself to realize what transpired during this interview. Number one, and I never put the top 10 list in my recap, but I want to make an interesting point. This probably should be part of my last word, but the top 10 list today was about screening excuses, and it was a little bit joking, but in all seriousness, don't accept excuses like that from your staff, and above all, don't accept them from yourself, is sort of the moral of the story of why I wanted to put that top 10 list in today. Do not accept that excuse, especially from yourself. If you find yourself falling into that pattern, raise your standards, and really don't accept any excuses. As far as what we covered with Dr. Margolin, first of all, your Empowered book, I'm interested in reading it, but I like the idea of just getting empowered and empowering others. And that leads right into, we talked about high staff morale, and that's something you could work on right now that doesn't cost any money. That you can really just get that staff morale up, put purpose into your training, invest in training your staff, no matter how you do it, whether it's with Dr. Dan's videos or whether it's whatever protocol you have or whatever management consulting group you're working with. There is some protocol you have. Look for the purpose in there and find out where it is. So we talked about that today. PR is really probably the most underutilized thing. We talk so much about where am I doing a screening event, where am I doing a talk, and you got to have some PR to back that up. You got to put some goodwill out there into the community. Dr. Dan certainly did that just with his Shoes for the Needy. He's been doing 26 years. My goodness. So all that kind of stuff. And then, really ride these campaigns. I like the shyness thing. I'm going to mention that again in my last word now, because it really is a component. And I think particularly with the medical doctors, okay, we have a whole coaching program we do to teach you how to get medical doctors to refer people to you. But I find that the biggest thing we are getting you to overcome is that shyness. It is a shyness of not shining as a chiropractor and saying, here's what we do, and realizing that probably a good 80% of these guys is ready to receive that kind of information. So there's that. We covered with Dr. Dan the misestimated effort of it's at least twice the effort that you think. And you're going to have to really account for that. So you can put that in your planning. And then on screenings, the local fairs over the mall, the crayon display versus the highly professional one, don't underestimate that. Dr. Dan, thank you for that piece of advice, because actually that's not only a good one and it'll save them a lot of money, but you actually found you got better results, having something less professional looking. So that's something that we want them to definitely use. And then walking around and meeting people. I think if I agree with anything you said, Doc, it was the fact that just getting out there and talking to people is the thing. And you actually just described the whole reason why I started this podcast. Ever since I've been podcasting about what I love to do and what I love to talk about, I have been so on purpose every day, and things have been improving around here by leaps and bounds. Our coaching calls are better. Everything's better. Everybody's coming up. Spirits are high at an all-time high, and it's fantastic. So I love it. So that's our recap on the show. Now for the last word. Who gets the last word? I do. After all, it's my show. So what should we take away from today's podcast? If anything, I hope you take away some inspiration. Let's say especially inspiration, and some tips from another parallel professional. He may not be a chiropractor, but it is a parallel industry, and a lot of the same principles apply, and I can attest to that because I've applied many of his principles in what I do to market practices as well, and the practices that I've marketed over the years. Someone who's done it more than once says that it takes probably more than you estimated. And most of all, I hope you realize that it just takes some ingenuity, some high morale, and even some fun to really grow your practice, that it's not grueling, and many of these things will cost you little or no money. That's what I'd like you to take away from today's show. And especially that you can simply do a PR campaign. And you know what? Let me append one more thing onto the last word, and that was this thing about shyness. Don't be shy about who you are to anybody, to any other professional, to anybody. Okay, so wouldn't it be amazing if we could look back on this moment and say this is where it all changed? Remember I said a couple episodes ago, I'm going to say this every episode. I'm in love with that idea. Let's look back on this show today with Dr. Dan Margolin and say, wow, that's where my success started. This is where it all changed. You could literally take what's in this episode today or all the previous episodes, whichever one you want to pick. Episode 3, 1 new patient a day, or hiring those CMAs, 2Xing your screening results, new patient hotspots, Doctored the Movie, CalMag, Instant CalMag C, Dr. Dan Margolin's taking marketing DeFEET, right? Any of these things, this is the point where it changed. Dr. Dan Margolin, first of all, thank you again so much for being on the show, but I'd like to make a contact point for you. We're going to post some stuff on social media about you. Your staff training video, basicstafftraining.com, am I correct?
That is correct, Frank. Thank you.
I was on the site. It's brilliant. You should at least go and watch his video about it. It's very, very cool. And I recommend that you contact Dan. Dan, is that the best way for them to contact you through the website?
They could do that, or my personal email is, if they'd like, is danmar, DANMAR, 609 at AOL.
Fantastic. There you have it. And, of course, you can always default to sending me email through the show, frank.screenings@live.com, and I will more than happily forward your email or your information and all your information to Dr. Dan Margolin. Anything that gives me an excuse to talk to him more than I already do will be appreciated. So if you want to do that, you'll be helping me out as well. Next episode, I'm not going to say just yet, but we've got a surprise cooked up for you. If you thought Dr. Dan Margolin was big, and he is big, we have an absolute giant, this time in the chiropractic industry. I know I've been hinting at it, and I know I've been teasing you and giving you teasers, but it's coming. I believe we're recording that episode next week. And we got a couple other goodies for you. I will work for patients. Incidentally, so will Dr. Dan Margolin. So will you? We need some brave souls. Come on, guys. We need you to get out there with Doctored the movie, all that stuff. We want you to get those cardboard signs and show your spirit. We'll work for patients. Send us the pictures, okay? And I don't know, you guys. How about we have Dr. Margolin back another time? Doc, would you like to come back to the show maybe another time? We'll have some fun.
It was such a pleasure. I would be here every day if you wanted.
Fantastic. I love it. Quick plug for the free resources. YouTube, you can find on screeningexperts.com. Go to the bottom where it says free resources. You'll see our blog where you can link to chiropracticmarketingadvice.com. You can also go there direct. And our YouTube site where there are free videos on chiropractic that you can put up on your website, in your social media. You can share them. As always, listen, subscribe, download. We've got all the social media on willworkforpatients.com. I'm not even going to get into the social media, but go there, friend us, like us, all that stuff. Beyond Pod is the app to use that we like for Android. You can subscribe in iTunes on your computer or on your iPhone, iPad, etc., or just subscribe to the RSS feed. Remember, this is a grassroots effort to make a chiropractic world like we all want. So let's make every episode count, shall we? I know I can count on you. So, my friends, we've come to the end of another magnificent episode with Dr. Dan Margolin. Thank you, Dr. Margolin, for being here so much. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. On behalf of myself, Dr. Margolin, our announcer, Michelle, and the rest of the Screening Experts crew, I thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon for yet another action-packed episode of Will Work for Patients. So long.
Be sure to subscribe and share. Will Work for Patients has been brought to you courtesy of Screening Experts, bringing unscripted simplicity to chiropractic marketing complexity. Today's episode, copyright Screening Experts LLC, musical score composed and arranged by Frank Sardella ASCAP. For more information, visit screeningexperts.com.